نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we'll resume with our 10th session. The first hadith we'll be covering will be the hadith on the importance of avoiding futile acts. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. Hadithun hasanun rawahu at-Tirmidhi." On the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "From the beauty of a person's Islam is his leaving of that which does not benefit him." A Hasan sound hadith, which is recorded by Imam Tirmidhi in his Sunan. This is a very important hadith, one of the fundamental hadiths in Islam, as quoted by the scholars of Islam. We covered it before. This is one of the fundamental hadiths of Islam, from which a lot of which is a basis for so many hadiths. Next slide. The commentary of the hadith. What is the meaning of the beauty of Islam? What does it mean by the beauty of Islam? Because the phrase used in the hadith is from the beauty min husni Islamil mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. From the beauty of a person's Islam. The meaning, the sign of the highest level of Iman is to avoid futile activities in terms of speech and action. So a person who avoids vain and futile acts is the sign that this person has been gifted with the highest level of Iman. The status of his Iman occupies a very high rank. That is the sign. So futile activities is a very broad term. So it will include anything that is vain and of no benefit. So sinful acts, they are also futile activities. Detestable acts, makruhat, they also fall under futile activities. And even permissible acts. Even permissible acts, they also fall under those which are, free from any benefit, which are, vain. They also fall under futile activities. Anything that is of no benefit in this life, knowing the hereafter, is futile, whether it be sinful or not sinful. But our concern here is, what we are going to be touching upon is from the permissible acts. Obviously, we know what is sinful is. We know, to avoid sinful, acts is an obligation. That is very obvious. That is very clear cut. But today our focus is on permissible acts. That comes under futile activities. Its harm and its importance of, and the importance of avoiding from it. So in the hadith, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam phrased the beauty of Islam, the Iman of the highest level, he phrased it as the beauty of Islam. The Iman, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Iman of the highest level, he phrased it as the beauty of Islam. This is the beauty of Islam. Ibn Rajab rahmatullah said, leaving of that which is futile most commonly refers to controlling one's tongue from futile speech. So when we talk about futile activities, etc., in the Islam, and the word lagh is used, most commonly it refers to speech, basically, speech related. Vain speech, speech which is of no benefit, speech in which you do not receive no reward. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in Surah Mu'minun, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون. So Allah Ta'ala is describing the believers, the status of the believers. The believers are the, successful indeed are the believers. الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون. Those who are attentive in their salah. Then he says والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون. And those who keep themselves away from vain things. So one of the qualities of a believer, one of the qualities of a successful believer is that he refrains from vain activities. So that highlights the importance of refraining from unnecessary activities, meaning wasting your time, not benefiting neither in this world nor in the hereafter. Benefiting, occupying in yourself in worldly activities is a good thing. It's a beneficial thing. But if you're doing something in which you're not benefiting in neither ways, then that is a big loss. Comes under wasting time. Time is very valuable, which has been given to us. Once your time is gone, you can't bring it back. Other things, if you lose, you can gain it back. Money, you lost money, you can't get it back. If a person is unhealthy, he can become healthy again. But time is such a thing that, you can't get it back. There is no time machine. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, from the beauty of a person in Islam is to talk less in the things that doesn't benefit. Clear hadith. In another hadith, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تكثروا الكلام بغير ذكر الله فإن كثرة الكلام بغير ذكر الله قسوة للقلب وإن أبعد الناس من الله القلب القاسي. رواه الترمذي. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not talk excessively without the zikr of Allah. Meaning, if there's anything to be excessive in, then it's the zikr of Allah. Do the zikr of Allah excessively. Don't talk excessively, which is of no benefit. Then Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes on to say, فَإِنَّ كَثْرَةَ الْكَلَامِ بِغَيْرِ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ قِسْوَةٌ لِلْقَلْبِ. The excessive speech without the zikr of Allah is the cause of the heart hardening. The heart becoming hard and stubborn. وَإِنَّ أَبْعَدَ النَّاسِ مِنَ اللَّهِ الْقَلْبُ الْقَاسِي. In the day of judgment, the most distant of the people from Allah, meaning from His mercy, from His grace, are the people with a hard heart. So there is a severe warning in the hadith, the harms of talking excessively, without the zikr of Allah, that it is the sabab, it is the means of the heart becoming hard. So once the heart becomes hard, what happens is there's so many harms, there's so many disadvantages, there's so many cons. One of it is that once your heart is hard, it's not going to be very accepting of anything good. You're going to feel it. Certain people, when you recite the Quran in front of them, they don't like it. Those people who are, people who are not religious people and who listen to music and stuff. When you recite the Quran to them, they don't like it. They're so they feel very uneasy. They feel very uncomfortable. They will say that, can you just turn it off and all this. This is because of the heart has become hard. The heart has been filled with filth, that it doesn't accept any truth. So one of the harms of the heart becoming hard is that it's not gonna be very accepting of any good. And obviously your taqwa will be less. It will be very hard for you to cry, to shed your tears. One of the means of a person's dua being accepted, a person with a very hard heart, it's very hard for him to cry. Now that is a big deprivation. Praying to Allah and not being able to cry is a big deprivation. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was such a big personality, a person of his caliber. He was, in terms of judgment, he was very firm. But he had a very soft heart. He would cry excessively. He will fall unconscious out of the fear of Allah. He cried so much so that there were stains, there were marks and scars on his face. Now you tell me, in this day and age, can you show me show a person who cried because of his excessive crying? He left a mark, scar on his cheek. So this is who Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was. So many other people like him. And if you have a hard heart, then you're also going to be very, very negligent and careless regarding your religious matters. So may Allah save us. May Allah give us a very soft heart. Allah Ta'ala save us from qiswatul qalb. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in another hadith, لَيْسَ يَتَحَسَّرُ أَهْلُ الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا عَلَى سَاعَةٍ مَرَّتْ بِهِمْ وَلَمْ يُذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِيهَا. Look at the hadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That in the day of judgment, when the people, the pious people will be given Jannah, they will make the entry into paradise. The only regret they would have. Now, Allah Ta'ala has given them everything. They are the most successful people. They have saved, they have, they have done enough in this world, because of which Allah Ta'ala saved them from the fire of Jahannam, and now they finally made it. Now the only regret, the only regret they will have is the time they pass without the zikr of Allah. Because that time which has passed without the zikr of Allah, if they preoccupied that time in the zikr of Allah, they could have what more. This is the importance of engaging yourself in doing good, engaging yourself in doing something very beneficial. A very strong hadith. Prophet ﷺ said, the inmates of paradise will not regret over anything except for the time they had passed wherein they didn't remember Allah. This is the reason why we have kafaratul majlis. When we finish a gathering, when we stand up from a gathering, the dua that we read, subhanallah bihamdi subhanak, this dua, kafaratul majlis. Any deficiencies, any shortcomings that happen in the gathering, Allah Ta'ala will forgive. So we should always compensate with the zikr of Allah. Imam 𝐿-Ghazali rahmatullah in 𝐤𝐸-الدين, he categorized speech into 4 categories. So one speech is harmful speech. The second one is beneficial speech. The third one is harmful and beneficial. And the fourth one is neither harmful nor beneficial. So the one that is harmful, the first category, obviously you should avoid sinful speech. The second one, which is beneficial, obviously you should cling on to it. You should engage yourself in the zikr of Allah, good speech, for which you are entitled to receive reward. The third one is harmful and beneficial, so you should avoid it to be on the safe side. And the last one, which is neither harmful nor beneficial, you should also avoid that, because that comes under wasting time, and that comes under futile activities, etc. So you shouldn't be excessive in vain talks, basically. Talking to your family members, spending time with them, that doesn't fall under lagwa, that doesn't fall under futile activities. If you do not talk, how are you going to bond with them? That's an important part of bonding with somebody. That is fine, but excessive speech, that's what I mean. When you talk excessively, the motive is different, and it will most likely lead to a sin, and obviously comes under wasting time. And bonding with people and friends, that is fine. But do not be excessive in your speech. Do not be excessive in vain talks. That's my point. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullah in Zadul Ma'ad, he obviously he was a polymath. He was a master in so many different fields, a very great scholar of the 8th century. So he's written many books. One of the books that he's written is his book on the medicine of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah Ta'ala gave him great knowledge in medicine as well, in prophetic medicine, herbal medicine. So he said that when a person talks excessively, then what happens? The strength of the strength of the brain, that weakens. So when that weakens, he will have headache. So you must have seen that people who talk a lot, they also have headache as well. The brain doesn't function properly. So this is one of the things that he highlighted. He said that when a person talks excessively, then the strength of the brain weakens, and when the brain weakens, what happens? This person will have a lot of headache. So this is one of the things that he has mentioned in Zadul Ma'ad. Next slide. Hadith on the importance of avoiding futile acts. Lessons from the hadith. To refrain from all types of futile acts, whether it be sinful or permissible. As the case of the former is obvious, the case of the latter is that it will lead to a sin, or it will come under wasting time, which is disliked. Okay, so if it's sinful, you should refrain, and if it's permissible, then why should you refrain? It will either lead to a sin, or it will come under wasting time. A person who is firm with his do's and don'ts in the Sharia will find it much more easier to refrain from futile and vain acts because of the nature of this person's iman, which is the virtue of having complete iman. So a person who is very firm with his practices, with his religious duties, with his do's and don'ts, it's very easy for him to refrain from futile acts, because time is very valuable to that person. This person takes his time really seriously. You know, he has in conscious the akhirah, consciousness in the akhirah. You know, so this person, to him, time is very valuable. You know, people who are abid, who are very pious people, you're never ever going to see these people, you know, when they're in the masjid, you're never going to see them wasting their time. When you go into a mosque, there's so many different types of people. One people, they are always chatting. They're using it as a community center. You know what I mean? So some people in the masjid, they're always talking. They have nothing better to do. They come to the mosque, and rather than doing the ibadah of Allah, what do they? They're always talking. They're talking about politics and everything. And yeah, you have other people who are the total opposite. You know, or you're always seeing them praying, you're always seeing them, you know, reciting the Quran, you know. So these are the people who are, you know, it's easy for them to do that. They value their time. Okay. If a person wastes time in futility, then that person will always regret later on. But if a person does a good action, then that person will always be satisfied and content with himself. So this is obvious. You know, when you waste your time later on, you know, if you were to reflect, I'm saying, if you were to take accountability of yourself, then you're always going to regret. If only I spent my time, you know, doing something good, doing something beneficial. You know, people have these regrets. You know, the older you get, the more you reflect and you regret about your past. You know, I should have studied properly, but you know, I dropped out from school, and look, now I'm working in, you know, working in Tesco or Iceland, for example. You know, if I studied better, then I could have got a job in a better place. You know, people have these regrets. And if you do something beneficial, then you're never going to regret later on. So we are given two ways to benefit ourselves. One in terms of this, one in terms of the akhirah for our worship and good deeds, and the other is through, you know, worldly related things. For example, education, learning different skills, earning a livelihood, or doing anything that is beneficial in this world. So there are two ways of benefiting. We should not be, you know, our time should not pass, meaning our time should not be free from it should not be free from none of these things. So a believer should never allow a moment to pass except that he is benefiting himself, either in terms of the akhirah or in terms of the world. So the most precious thing Allah gave to us is the time. We should value time. We should utilize our time properly. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next hadith? Okay, we're moving on to the next hadith. Hadith on sufficing on the mandatory actions. The Prophet ﷺ is reported from the hadith is an Abi Abdullah Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma anna rajulan sa'ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam faqala أرأيت إذا صليت المكتوبات وصمت رمضان وأحللت الحلال وحرمت الحرام ولم أزد على ذلك شيئا أدخل الجنة قال نعم رواه مسلم. So a man asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, do you think if I perform the obligatory prayers, fast in Ramadan, treat as lawful that which is halal, and treat as forbidden that which is haram, and do not increase upon that, then shall I enter paradise? The Prophet ﷺ replied, yes. Next slide. So the meaning of the person saying regard as lawful that which is halal, what this means is that the person, he He believed that that which Allah Ta'ala has made haram is unlawful. He agrees. That's one of the that's one of the necessities of iman. Whatever Allah Ta'ala had made haram is haram. Whatever Allah Ta'ala made halal is halal. So his aqidah is firm. So the person saying this means I believe that which Allah Ta'ala has made haram as haram. And not only that, he also refrains from it. So two things. His aqidah is sahih, that he believes that which is haram as haram, and he also refrains from it. The second part, and he regards lawful that which is halal. I mean, whatever Allah Ta'ala has made halal, he believes that is halal. So him saying regarding halal, lawful that which is halal, meaning he believes. So this person, he is firm with his farais. Wherever Allah Ta'ala has ordained upon him, he does it. And his aqidah is also sahih. So he is saying to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, am I going to go Jannah? If I'm firm and steadfast with all of my farais, all of the obligations, and I regard haram as unlawful, that I regard lawful, unlawful that which is haram, and lawful that is halal, am I going to enter Jannah? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, it's sufficient for you to enter paradise. If this is the case, go on to the next slide. So the person says, and do not increase upon that. So the person said, I do not do anything extra. I only suffice with the farais, with the obligations. I do not do anything extra. Am I going to enter paradise? Is it sufficient for me to enter paradise? Rasulullah said yes. So this hadith needs explanation, it needs clarification. So from the apparent text, it seems that the Prophet ﷺ absolved the person from carrying out nafal and sunnah actions. So if you look into the zahiri text of the hadith, the apparent text of the hadith, you're gonna be, you're gonna have the notion or the idea that I do not need to do no sunnah. As far as is enough, I don't need to pray my sunnah, etc. It's sufficient. From the zahiri hadith, this is the understanding you're gonna get. So this is the reason why this needs to be clarified. So as for nafal actions, obviously no one is obliged to carry them out. You will be rewarded if you carry them out. If you leave them out, then nothing happens. But what about the sunnah actions? The sunnah prayers, like the sunanul rawatib, the sunnah muakkada, what about them? Can they be omitted? Are we going to go for the hadith? Does the hadith imply that we can leave our sunnah muakkada, like the sunnah of Fajr Salah and all the other sunanul rawatib? So how are we going to explain the hadith? How are we going to reconcile? How are we going to resolve? So the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell the questioner. So basically, so when the person said that, I'm just going to suffice with my farais, and is it enough for me to enter Jannah? Rasulullah said yes. Now the objection is that why didn't Rasulullah object to that person and say, no, you're going to have to do your sunnah? So the answer to this is the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell the questioner about it either, because the person may have newly entered into Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't want to pressure him to do more than the mandatory actions, fearing he may distance himself from the religion. So Rasulullah ﷺ was using hikmah. When a person newly enters into Islam, you don't want to bombard him with so many duties. He may end up leaving the religion. So you have to be very easygoing. You have to make it very easy for that person. When a person accepts Islam, he recites the Shahada, you teach him the basic things, the wudu and how to pray Salah, and just teach him, 2 surahs, Surah Fatiha and Qul Hu Allah. Let him get used to that. In the beginning, don't teach him all the 10 surahs. You're going to make him feel very uncomfortable, because he came from another dimension, another extreme. Now he has come into something completely new, which is full of discipline. So his heart is not going to be very accepting. So you should be using hikmah. It's a great lesson from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he wanted to give him more time to settle down, and once he's firm enough with his fara'is, he can start with practicing on the sunnah muwakkadas. The same explanation can be given for nafil action. So this is one explanation to the objection. A person may, read this hadith and say, this hadith clearly states that, just by sufficing on the fara'is, I'm going to enter Jannah. I don't need sunnah. I don't need to, carry out my sunnah. This is the answer you can give. That Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was being easy on that person. Didn't want to pressure this person. So this hadith in no way negates that a person doesn't need to carry out his sunnah to muwakkada, his emphasized sunnah, and also nafil as well. So once you're used to with your fara'is, you can move on with your sunan and nawafil. Allahu a'lamu bis-sawab. So he says, we're living at such a time that is a common problem. People are taking the sunnah very lightly. Outwardly, in terms of appearance and also in terms of action as well. People are taking sunnah very lightly in general. People, nowadays people do not keep, a lot of people, they do not keep beard with the intention of sunnah, with the intention of fashion. The having beard is a trend in the fashion industry, having beard. The youth, when they keep beard, is with the intention of fashion. Now, if that person had the intention of sunnah, that person would have been rewarded. So, in terms of appearance and in terms of practically, it's very that side, it's very weak. People are taking the sunnah very lightly. Especially, when you have people reading this hadith and, they're not going to even ask for explanation. They just want to, save themselves. They want everything easy. They want everything easy. Acting upon the sunnah has been emphasized in the shariah. Allah Ta'ala in many places he mentioned, مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. Allah Ta'ala is regarding the ita'at, the obedience of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his obedience. مَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. Whoever obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. In another verse, Allah Ta'ala is saying, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. So in this verse, Allah Ta'ala is saying, never by your Lord, never shall they become believers unless they make you the judge in the disputes that arises between them. So Allah Ta'ala is making the obedience of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the branch of Iman, from one of the requirements of Iman, one of the necessities of Iman. You do not make Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam your judge, you're not a believer. And plus, when Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam decides, makes a judgment, you shouldn't feel uneasy. You should accept it. You should take it. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in another hadith, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ تَمَسَّكُوا بِهَا وَعَضُّوا عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذِ. The Sahih hadith in Abu Dawud. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, you must then follow my sunnah and that of the rightly guided caliphs, adhere to it and hold fast to it. The emphasis on the sunnah. You should never take the sunnah lightly. It is what distinguishes you from the other communities. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has his ways and you as a follower, you have to follow his ways. You can't just say, whatever is in the Quran. Don't become, then you're emulating the Quranist. May Allah save us, this deviant sect. You follow the Quran and you follow the Sunnah. Next slide. So since the discussion of we're discussing Sunnah, it's very appropriate that I'll go over the categories of Sharia. so that we know what we need to do and what we don't need to do. You know, the scholars, the mujtahidun, the jurists of Islam, they went through so much hardship in, you know, arranging the sharia, categorizing the sharia, making sure that we do not miss out. We are not deprived from anything. So we should make dua for them. You know, may Allah reward them for the sacrifice. So I'm going to go over the categories of sharia so we know what we need to do, what we don't need to do, you know, in detail, inshallah. So obviously, why in the sharia we have farz, wajib, sunnat, mustahab? Why do we have all this? It is based on the, it stems from the text of the sources. It's all based on the text of the sources from the Quran and Sunnah. The nature of the text, if you know what I mean. So whatever the text necessitates, demands, you know, based on that, you know, a person, the scholars will say, okay, this is farz, this is wajib. So it's the field of the scholars, is their skill, is the ability, is, you know, it's the ability that Allah Ta'ala has given them. So according to the Hanafi madhhab, so altogether we have about 12 categories of the laws of Sharia. We have 12 different categories. And obviously we have so many commonalities and many differences as well. With the other madhahib as well. Some other madhahibs may not have some of the categories that we have. So there are commonalities and there are differences as well. The first mandatory is that which the Sharia demands is doing emphatically, which is proven through a qat'i dalil, clear-cut evidence that doesn't have any doubts in it, like the 5 pillars of Islam. Farz can only be established from the Quran, mutawatir, hadith and ijma. So this is what farz is. You know, there's nothing more I need to mention. So is proven from the Quran, mutawatir, hadith and ijma. So they are clear-cut evidences. So the ruling of farz is that it's incumbent that a person carries it out. One should have the belief that it is farz. If something is farz, you need to have the belief that it is farz. The doer will be rewarded and the one leaving out will be punished. It's punishable. And the one who rejects farz, a person who rejects a farz action is deemed as having committed kufr. So if something is farz and you reject it, you deny it, then you'll be deemed as a kafir. May Allah save us. So this is what farz is. Second slide, wajib, obligatory, is that which the Sharia demands is doing emphatically, which is proven from a dhanni dalil, non-clear-cut evidence, like the interpreted verses and authentic hadiths from the ahad category. So wajib and farz, they are same when it comes to carrying it out. The way carrying out a farz, you know, the way you have to carry out farz, similarly, you have to carry out wajib. In terms of action, doing is the same. But in terms of aqidah, in terms of having the belief and not having the belief, they are different. So in farz, you need to have the belief that is farz. In farz, if you reject farz, then you're going to become a kafir. Wajib, if you reject it, you're not going to become a kafir. That's the difference. You're going to be a deviant, but you're not going to be a kafir. Why? Because the source of wajib is not clear-cut evidence. They are authentic, but they are not as strong as the evidence of farz. So some of the example I mentioned, so obviously wajib, anything that is wajib, you know, is extracted from interpreted verses. So, you know, there are verses of the Quran where there are scholarly differences, for example. You know, like for example, masa of the head. So regarding the amount, you know, some scholars say, you know, 1/4 of the head, some say the full head. So there is a difference in this verse. So that no longer remains farz. It is, the masa of the head, you cannot be used as an example. So basically, you know, whenever there are scholarly differences regarding a verse, so that no longer becomes a what? Farz. It remains as a wajib. So it's still authentic. and authentic hadith is from the ahad category. So these are obviously, they are authentic hadith, but obviously the status is lower than mutawatir hadith. So this is the science of hadith, terminology, etc. Okay, some of the examples of wajib are sadqatul fitr, witr salah, Eid salah, etc. Wajib is established from the Quran and authentic hadith. The ruling of wajib is the same as far as, except the one rejecting it will not be deemed as having committed kufr. Okay, the next one, sunnah muakkada. So this is our focus. So we need to know how important sunnah muakkada is, what it means, what's its ruling. The sunnah muakkada is also known as sunnatul huda. You know, you have two types of sunnah, sunnatul huda, sunnatul huda and sunnatul zawaid. Okay, the sunnah muakkada is also known as sunnatul huda. So it is a non-obligatory practice which the Prophet ﷺ always practiced upon, except in some circumstances he left it out. Otherwise, if he continuously does an action without leaving it out, it will become wajib. The sunnah muakkada, one of the condition of act being regarded as sunnah muakkada is that Rasulullah ﷺ did it. He always did it, but he sometimes left it out. Otherwise, if Rasulullah ﷺ continuously does an action, then it will become wajib. So this is something that needs to be noted. So sometimes Rasulullah did certain actions which he never left out, which he always did, but they are still regarded as sunnah muakkada. What is the reason? So there are some cases like this that he continuously did it without leaving it out, but they are still regarded as sunnah muakkada. So in some cases, the Prophet ﷺ did the action without leaving it out. Even then, it remained as sunnah muakkada. Like the i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan. So it's sunnah muakkada. No one says it's wajib. So what's the reason? So the answer to this is that the Prophet ﷺ may have continuously performed i'tikaf, but he never reprimanded those who didn't perform it. Thus, it is another way of discontinuity in action. So Rasulullah may have continuously did it, but he didn't disapprove or criticize those who didn't do i'tikaf. So that also indicates that it is a sunnah muakkada. Whereas if Rasulullah did criticize, for example, why you're not doing i'tikaf, then it would have become wajib. So this is the clarity. Ruling of sunnah muakkada. A person is greatly encouraged to practice upon sunnah muakkada. The doer will be rewarded. If a person lives it out because of a valid excuse, then he will not be sinful. If a person habitually lives it out without a valid excuse, then he will be criticized, labeled as a deviant for taking lightly the matters of deen, and will be sinful, except the sin is lighter than the sin for leaving out wajib. So we need to know the consequences. We know the importance. So if a person leaves out sunnah muakkada, you know, some of the examples of sunnah muakkada is, you know, the sunnah of fajr, the 4 rakat sunnah before zuhur and the 2 rakat sunnah after zuhur, the 2 rakat sunnah after maghrib, the 2 rakat sunnah after isha. So these are the examples of sunnah muakkada. So if someone leaves it out because of a valid excuse, he's not going to be sinful. You know, he's not going to be criticized. Nothing's going to happen. You know, for example, a person didn't have time, you know, and the time is running out, it's going to end, his namaz is going to become qaza. So in this situation, he can't pray his sunnah, because if he preoccupies himself in praying sunnah, his farz will become qaza. So these are some of the examples. So in these scenarios, this person will not be sinful. But if a person makes the habit of leaving out sunnah like regularly, he never prays his sunnah, you know, after he just prays farz without any valid excuse, that person, he will be committing a minor sin for sunnah muakkada. Imam Taftazani, rahmatullah, a great Hanafi scholar, he said to leave out a sunnah muakkada act is close to haram that will result in being deprived from the intercession of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a person who leaves out sunnah muakkada again, you know, unnecessarily, excessively, then, you know, it is close to haram. It will become close to haram, and he'll be deprived from the intercession of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Shafa'ah, one of the greatest gifts that has been given to this ummah. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Maqam Mahmud, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be given the permission to intercede. So you're going to be deprived from that. May Allah save us. Imam Abu Yusuf al-Bazdawi and others have said to leave it out will be a minor sin. Imam Abu Abbas al-Qurtubi said whoever persistently leaves out the sunnah al-muwakkada he's referring to, then that will cause deficiency in his deen and he will be disparaged in his personal profile. If he leaves it out of negligence and less interest, then that will be regarded as fisk. That will be regarded as disobedience. So what does it mean by his personality, being disparaged, criticized? Meaning your adala will drop. So one of the conditions of accepting hadith from somebody, back in the days when the trend of transmitting hadith was circulating, the muhaddithun like Imam Bukhari and the great muhaddithun, the reliable muhaddithun, they're not going to accept hadith from anybody, especially if a person is consistent or persistent in leaving sunnah muwakkada. For little things they used to reject hadith from narrators, and a person leaving sunnah, that's not going to even cross anyone's mind. So it was a big part. Whoever they accepted a hadith from, they made sure that this person was practicing. He was firm with his sunnah. That for little things they would reject hadith from narrators. So his adala will drop, his personal, he will be dented basically. Okay, the second slide. Sunanu Zawaid, non-emphasized sunnah, also known as sunnah ghayr muqaddah. So Sunanu Zawaid is famously known as sunnah ghayr muqaddah. We say some sunnah ghayr muqaddah in the in the fiqh books. You see sunnah ghayr muqaddah. It's not phrased as sunnah Zawaid, but they both mean the same thing. Is a non-emphasized sunnah practice like the lifestyle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his wearings, his manner of the manner of his sitting, etc. This sunnah is not presented as a completion for the deen. This is the reason why it is called sunnah zawaid, sunnah that is from the extraness. The sunnah zawaid is optional. Is to do with the lifestyle of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way he would sit, the way he would eat and everything. So these are from the sunnah zawaid. If you do them, you're going to be rewarded, and if you do not do them, you're going to be rewarded, and if you don't do, then you're not going to be sinful. Okay, nafal. Nafal same as sunnah zawaid. Nafal and sunnah zawaid or sunnah ghayr muwakkada, they're the same. There are few differences. The same as sunnah, nafal same as sunnah. Okay, sunnah zawaid. Except that there are two differences between the two. That is, the term nafal is used for ibadah and sunnah zawaid is used for adat, habits. So nafal, when the term nafal is used, it's going to refer to ibadat, salah, etc. And zawaid are to do with habits, eating, sitting, etc. Yeah. So this is the slight difference. Secondly, nafal is legislated as an extra for farais and wajibat, unlike sunnah zawaid, which is not as such, as explained before in the definition of sunnah zawaid. So nafal, the reason why nafal has been legislated in the sharia is as an extra, as a bonus. It's part of the sharia, is a completion for the sharia, nafal. So in the day of judgment, if you had any shortcomings in your farais or wajibat, the nafal will save you. The nawafil, they will save you. So it's a completion for the sharia. But sunnah zawaid is not as a completion for the sharia, basically. Tawattu', same as nafal. Mustahab, same as nafal. Mandub, same as nafal. So they are all synonymous. Mubah is an act that is permissible that is permissible, like eating, drinking. These are all permissible acts. Ruling of mubah is that the person is not rewarded for doing it and not criticized, nor sinful for leaving it out. Except the latter case, the person will not be allowed to stay hungry or thirsty to the extent of self-harm. Okay, that's obvious. So, eating, drinking, these are all necessities of life. These are permissible. You are neither rewarded nor you are sinful if you leave it out. But if you are starving yourself unnecessarily to the extent of self-harm, then that will not be allowed. And again, mubahats, many sessions back we covered the issue. You can turn your permissible acts into reward with intention and the way to do it. So the habits, you can transform them into ibadah. We covered that many sessions back. Next slide, haram, prohibited, is that which the Sharia demands is leaving out and to be refrained from emphatically, which is proven from a clear-cut evidence that has no doubts in it, like the prohibition of killing, consuming alcohol, adultery, theft, etc. These are haram. Ruling of haram is mandatory to abstain from it. Those who commit it will be punished, and the one deeming haram as lawful will be deemed as having committed kufr. Makruh tahrimi. Makruh tanzihi. Okay. Makruh tahrimi, severely disliked, is that which the Sharia demands is leaving out and to be refrained from emphatically, which is proven from a zanni dalil. We covered that, what zanni dalil means. Non-clear-cut evidence. It's authentic, but in terms of status is lower. In terms of authenticity is a bit lower. So this is the reason why we differentiate when it comes to categorizing. So something that is, because of the evidence, because of the nature of the evidence, we cannot, give them the same status. So below haram is makruh tahrimi. So the Hanafi scholars were very, very cautious when it came to categorizing. One of the most arranged, one of the most developed madhhab is the Hanafi madhhab. It's the madhhab which was made out of the committee of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa, he had his own committee of scholars. Each of them were masters in the field. So Imam Abu Hanifa, one of the specialities of the Hanafi mazhab is that Imam Abu Hanifa, he was the main man, and he had committee of scholars, and they would discuss masails, and this is how they arranged the Hanafi mazhab. So if you if you were to know the names of the scholars who are in Imam Abu Hanifa's committee, you'll be surprised. And those people who have misunderstanding and misconception regarding Abu Hanifa, that will be cleared. You had scholars like Abdullah bin Mubarak, Waki Jarrah. These are the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari. The students of Imam Abu Hanifa were the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari. So how dare do these people point finger at Imam Abu Hanifa? His very students were the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari. So if these scholars, if they had issue with Imam Abu Hanifa, then they wouldn't have sat in his gathering. The narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari, they were the students of Abu Hanifa. They learned knowledge from Abu Hanifa. So that is a testimony. That is approval. Waki bin Jarrah, Abdullah bin Mubarak, great scholars. And Imam Abu Hanifa was the leader. Not even one of them, their senior. Hawk in front of a sparrow. That's how I phrase it. Hawk in front of the sparrows. He was a giant. Sufyan Saudi or someone said that, we were in front of Abu Hanifa as though he was the hawk and we were the sparrow. So people need to, before criticizing somebody, you need to research. If you listen to any Tom, Dick and Harry and Juhal, you're going to end up cursing our pious elders. You should do research. The credit, they deserve the credit for what they did. Giant scholar. Okay. Going back to the definition, ruling of makruh tahrimi The one refraining from it will be rewarded and punished for committing it. Okay. Makruh tanzihi, mildly disliked, is that which the Sharia is that which the Sharia instructed is leaving out without emphasis. The ruling of makruh tanzihi, the one leaving it out will be rewarded, and the one committing it will be reprimanded but not punished. So if you do makruh tanzihi, you're not going to be sinful, you're going to be criticized basically. You're going to be reprimanded like you did something bad. And that could also lower your, your status. As I've mentioned before, your adala could drop. Before we close the chapter, if you brothers and sisters remember, in the very first lesson when we were touching upon the importance of knowledge, we mentioned farz ayn and farz kifaya. So since we are mentioning, going over the terminologies of fiqh, I thought that I might as well do a quick recap on this again as well before closing the chapter. So we mentioned all the farais, wajibat, sunan, etc. So in farz, we have two categories: farz ayn and farz kifaya. Yeah, farz ayn are the things that you have to do, like praying salah. So every individual is obliged to do it. Yeah, every single individual, you have to pray salah, you have to give zakat. If you have, if your wealth reaches nisab, you have to fast in the month of Ramadan. These are farz ayn. Farz kifaya is not farz upon everyone. If some do it, it'll be absorbed from the rest. So one of the examples of farz kifaya, you can say the salatul janaza. So not everyone has to attend salatul janaza. If a group attend, it'll be absorbed from the rest. So this is an example of farz kifaya. Also, listening to the Quran is also farz kifaya. So if the Quran is being read out and there's a group of people, then there should be at least one person listening to the Quran and not being careless. At least one person, otherwise everyone's going to be sinful. Nowadays, some people, what they do, they play the Quran in the tape and they're talking. They shouldn't be doing this. You either talk or you either listen. People, especially women in the kitchen, they will play the Quran and they're talking on the phone. I don't know why they do this. They shouldn't be doing this. You either listen to the Quran or you don't listen to the Quran. But when the Quran is being played, listen to it. Don't, I've said it's a farz kifaya. Memorizing the entire Quran is also farz kifaya. Replying to the salam is farz kifaya. Tashmitul atis, when the person sneezes, alhamdulillah, yarhamukallah, that is also farz kifaya. Meaning that is in terms of in a gathering, I'm saying. At least someone has to do it, otherwise everyone's going to be sinful in that sense. Bathing the, the deceased, praying salah. These are some of the examples of farz kifaya. Now in sunnah, you have two types of sunnah as well, sunnah ayn and sunnah kifaya. So sunnah ayn which is sunnah upon everyone. Everyone has to do it. Everyone's going to be rewarded for doing it. If you leave it out, then you did something very bad. Now, the example of sunnah ayn, you can say tarawih salah. Sunnah ayn, everyone has to do it. A very emphasized sunnah. Now, to pray with jama'ah congregation is kifaya. You have to pay attention to what I'm saying. The actual tarawih salah, praying individually, you can say sunnah muakkada, sunnah ayn, same thing. But to pray with congregation is kifaya. What this means is that at least some group of people in a community have to pray the tarawih salah with jama'ah. If no one prays with jama'ah, then obviously everyone, they did something very bad. Other example of sunnah kifaya, you can say i'tikaf in the last 10 days. That's sunnah kifaya. Sunnah muakkada and kifaya. So at least some people in the community have to be in i'tikaf. Otherwise, everyone, they have left out sunnah. So these are some of the examples. It's very important that we know this. We know the names of these categories, and we know what it means. So we know what to do and what not to do, and so that we are not left out and we do not miss out on any benefits. So these categories, they mean a lot. After a lot of extensive research, scholars have managed to, categorize them. These are not just names, they make a big difference. Nevertheless, let's move on to the last slide. Lessons from the hadith. This hadith should not be taken out of context or misunderstood. That is, a person should not think that he can get away with only carrying out the farais and wajibat, that can leave out the emphasized sunnah. Rather, along with all these, the emphasized sunnahs have to be carried out, unless it's left out because of a valid excuse. This is because being a follower of the Prophet ﷺ demands that his ways and practice be followed. Otherwise, that shows less interest and importance to his ways, which is a sign of clear deviation. Nafal acts should not be ignored totally, as it has been legislated as a bonus and extra to our obligatory acts. Not only nafal accounts for abundant reward, but it will compensate for our shortcomings in our obligatory actions, as said by the Prophet ﷺ. So there is a hadith proving that nafal acts have been legislated as a completion to our obligatory actions, and as a bonus. It will be a savior on the day of judgment. So the hadith, it goes as follows. Okay, so Rasulullah said, the first of the things Allah ordained upon the people from the religion was salah, and of the last actions to remain will be salah, and of the first things to be questioned will be regarding salah. And Allah will say, look into the salah of my servant. If it is complete, then it would be written as complete. And if it is incomplete, he will say, see if my servant has any voluntary prayer. If he has voluntary prayer, then the mandatory prayers will be compensated by voluntary prayer. Then Allah will say, see if his zakat is complete. What is meant by complete is basically if he has carried all of them out, meaning there is no qaza, etc. So see if his zakah is complete. If he is complete, then it will be written down as complete. And if he is incomplete, he will say, see if he has given any sadaqah. If he has given any sadaqah, then that will compensate for his zakah. It clearly states in the hadith that in the day of judgment, he will save us. So that's why we should also have in our account, nawafil. Nawafil, salah, sadaqah, they will save us. They will compensate for the farais that we have missed. They will compensate for the, zakat that we have missed. This is on the last stage. This is what will happen. So may Allah give us a tawfiq. Today we have covered a lot. You can go over the slides. If anyone has any questions, then you can ask on the group, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.